whole campaign on 250 and wanted to look into how our descendants, our ancestors, fit into this scenario, this whole Revolutionary War. So we looked at Black Patriots, and then as we looked closer, we started to add the Loyalists who fought for the crown. And we said there was a common thread there. All of them wanted freedom. They wanted a different freedom than the European patriots wanted. So that's how we got interested. So I want to take a minute, just do a little survey to find out where you're coming from. You could just, like, is there anyone from Ashburn, like that? I see someone, yes. Ashburn, okay. Chicago here, visiting?
Visiting.
Okay. Out of Virginia, okay. Ashburn, okay. Anywhere else?
Born and raised here in Leesburg.
Leesburg. Sterling back there. Okay. Full disclosure, that's my husband, so I know he's from Sterling. Anywhere else? We're not calling your name, we're not taking any notes. But we just want to get an idea. So outside of Virginia, we've got someone from Illinois, from Chicago, and Ashburn. We always have a lot of people from Ashburn. Anyone from Lovitz or Luckett's? That's way up. We don't get many people down here for that. So if someone can tell me, what are your expectations? I mean, one or two people tell me, what would you like to learn? You can use the title. Yes.
I'd just like to kind of understand as you said, you had both Loyalists and Patriots, and what the reasonings were for them choosing which side, that they did. And you mentioned in the beginning just the initial freedom, but why did they choose which side?
Good question. We're going to cover that. And if we don't cover it enough for you, let us know.
Okay.
So our presentation is an introduction. Gertrude and I have gone through this, and we said we could write a book on every slide that we present to you here today. And there's also some PhD historian out there doing it right now. So it's just an introduction to whet your whistle, get you interested in the subject. And it'll be two parts. We'll spend the first part, which is the longest part, on Patriots. And then we'll go into the Loyalists. And then we'll share some resources with you. I have some books on the table to share with you. You have some things in your chair that have been prepared. The brochure was prepared by the Loudoun County Courthouse, which is a fabulous brochure. Gives you an overview of all the documents they have in the courthouse related to the Revolutionary period. So with that, of course, the document that we are all talking about now is the Declaration of Independence. And I know most of you know this, but I'm going to read it because the next slide pertains to it. So from the Declaration, you can never read that, it has been transcribed. But we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights and inalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, the Declaration of Independence was a contradiction. There were thousands and thousands of people that it did not apply to. It didn't apply to women. So everybody sitting here who's a woman, this did not apply to you. It did not apply to people who look like me. It did not apply to Native Americans. So, and if you didn't own land, it didn't apply to you. And has anyone read through the Declaration of Independence at all? Just read, okay, in the back, you're cheating. telling the king, we don't like this, we don't like that, blah, 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 all the way through. So that's the declaration. But in the end, they're saying we're divorcing you because we don't like what you're doing. And it also is a civil war between the colonists. So everybody in the 13 colonies, they're all related, cousins, relatives, and so on, but they begin to take sides because they agree or disagree with the Declaration of Independence. Now, put down the day so that you know exactly where most historians begin with April 19, 1775, going through 1783, and 1783 was when the Treaty of Paris was signed to end the war. So we focus a lot on 1776, but we need to know the whole period. When we're honoring Black Patriots and Loyalists and telling all these stories, we're not negating the fact that there were contributions from all Americans. Contrary to many who talk today, America, as it was at that period, was diverse. The largest population being Native Americans. So people didn't come here and find vacant land. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of Native Americans. Even on the East Coast, I'm not even talking about the West, the Mid and the West. I'm only talking about the East Coast along the 13 colonies. So we had our indigenous brothers and sisters. They were free and enslaved. Some were enslaved, taken from this country and shipped to the Caribbean. African Americans came in, but their world started long before they came here. We could talk about them coming here even in the 15th century. And all of these dates that I have, many of you know 1619. I put 1630 because this is when, how should I say, slave codes began, where the identification and the division between people from European countries and people from African countries, laws started started to be created to control the property, because they were considered property. 1776, 1865, most of you are familiar with emancipation. We just came through our national holiday for Juneteenth, and it was in 1965 because of the voters, and so on. We could go on and on. Europeans, many people forget that many Europeans that came here were indentured. And so the indenture system faded out as the enslaved system increased. And you have to study indenture to understand that there was no need to give indentured people benefits when they had enslaved who could do everything they were doing for free. So that faded out. But there are people sitting and people all around the country. If you go back to your trees, you might have relatives that may have been indentured. Of course, today our focus will be on people of African descent. Now, we're talking about the Patriots and Loyalists, and people of African descent, and there were free people of that period too. Probably about 2 to 3% of the population, but there were people who were free. Many of them had come in as indentured. But the Patriots, both loyalists, those wanting to support the crown, they didn't really want to support the crown. They just wanted freedom because, and I'll talk a little bit later about that, a proclamation came along first before General Washington formed his Continental Army. And I'll stop right there. I'm going to get to the Patriots, to the Loyalists. I'll tell you a little bit more. But they both wanted freedom, but they achieved it in different means. Daniel Cohen, we'll talk about. He was a patriot. He lived in Loudoun County, and
Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks, a man of mixed African and Native American ancestry who had escaped slavery, is known as the first American colonist killed in the American Revolution. He was born in 1723 and died March 5, 1770 in Boston after British soldiers fired 2 musket balls into his chest. His death and that of 4 other men at the hands of the 29th Regiment became known as the Boston Massacre.
What we found out when we were doing research is patriots were all types of people. We hear, oh, I'm a patriot, we think it's all military, we think it's soldiers, we think it's people who are militia, from the militia. But also, there were spies, we had freedom seekers who ran for their own self-emancipation. We had a poet. We're going to tell you about a scientist. All these people born during this period. We had people who were enslaved, but also sued for their freedom. We had camp followers, and so these were families who followed their military husbands during the war, and there were women. And those camp followers, not necessarily, I know we're talking about Black Patriots, but all the Patriots had camp followers. And so the camp followers were their women and children and their daughters. And they worked in the camps by washing clothes, cooking, and also helping with injured and sick soldiers. Those camp followers, we don't hear a lot about them, but there were a lot of them. If you had a family of 5, and they were following you in battles all the way through, that increases the number of people who became patriots, because you're a patriot if you served, if you provided aid during the Revolutionary War. And these were strong leaders, because these Black Patriots had to be strong leaders in order to make the decisions that they did.
The Black Patriots, between 5,000 to 8,000 people of African descent, served in the Continental Army. Thousands of others served in state militias and at sea. They were not segregated. The 1st Rhode Island Regiment was the first Black military regiment in the U.S. formed in 1777. Daniel Coleman. Daniel Cohen was a free Black who enlisted in the Continental Army in Maryland in 1781. He served at the siege of Yorktown in October that secured the United States independence from Great Britain. He was discharged in Loudoun in late 1781. At age 93 and unable to work, he filed a claim at the courthouse to prove he served during the war and could receive a Revolutionary War pension. Primary documents can be viewed at the Loudoun Courthouse, and you have a copy in your seat. The Loudoun County Courthouse. The courthouse played a significant role in the Revolutionary War in a number of ways. In 1774, a meeting was held in the courthouse to discuss the protection of rights and liberties in North America. The group adopted the Loudoun Resolves, which declared loyalty to Britain and the King, but opposed taxation without representation. The Declaration of Independence was read on the steps of the first courthouse on August 12, 1776. This continues yearly on July 4th. Black Patriots in Loudoun County. John Chubb, planter living in Montgomery County, Maryland. Daniel Coleman served at the siege of Yorktown. James Morton, an Indian sailor living in Loudoun. Abraham Warwick, living in Frederick County, Virginia. William Whitbourne, living in Culpeper County. Charles Pierpont, living in Loudoun, listed as Indian. Charles Lewis, born free, served 3 years as a sailor. Luke Gowen, born free, served in the 56th and 57th Virginia Militia Regiments. And there's more information downstairs in the museum exhibit about Daniel Cohen, Charles Lucas, and Luke Cohen.
There were many hardships for all soldiers, but particularly black soldiers, Black Patriots and Militia. There were shortages of food. We will find that they had limited shelter. Remember, they were enslaved and free, and they were the last to get anything. So if there was shelter, those white soldiers would get the shelter first, and then the enslaved and free, and I have to say they both because they both participated, they may have to create their own. The greatest threat to all the soldiers, and even the camp followers, was smallpox and typhoid. And it was rampant. It was rampant throughout the war. And of course, in those days, they didn't know what to do about it. They were drinking water, but they could find water. If your comrade sitting next to you got smallpox, more than likely so would you. And you could move into your community and contaminate everyone. So smallpox was crazy. We hear a lot about smallpox in terms of losing a number of Native Americans, millions and millions of Native Americans. But in the war, they lost thousands and thousands of soldiers. Another challenge was the threat of capture. As I said, these soldiers, camp followers, any of them, they had run off of the plantations in the South and left homes in the North. And they couldn't be recaptured because, again, they were property. The re-enslavement, even though they were told they might be free as a result of working as a soldier, owners did not accept that. That was not something they accepted. So George Washington could say, you're free, you might be free, but if you don't have a piece of paper, a legal piece of paper, at the end of the war, then you would be taken back and re-enslaved. Another challenge which most people don't think about is emotional, missing family, not being among your community. Many of these Black Patriots, this is the first time they've ever worked side by side with other white men. So this is not their community. And so this is all new to them. And so even though we don't think of that, we just think a person can pick up a gun or pick up a knife and go out and fight. All these things are going through their mind. They don't know this person. Should I trust this person? Not from my community. But they did. They saw a need for freedom, pushed through that. One thing I was disappointed, and somebody can email me later if you know differently. Something comes up in writing or articles all the time. But George Washington was adamant about not including Negroes in his army. And so he delayed the participation of Black Patriots until almost the end of the war. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like other wars that we participate at the end? That we helped win the war at Yorktown because we finally participated? Well, I have respect for many things that George Washington did for the country. That's not one of them. And I'll tell you what the second one is later. War was brutal, I think. Did anyone here watch, who's our guy who does all that? Ken Burns, thank you. Yeah, did anyone here watch Ken Burns? Okay. Did he show you how brutal it was? Yes. Okay. So that's the backdrop of what you see here. It was brutal. And just want to leave you with it.
The enslaved. During the Revolutionary War, the enslaved worked the Loudoun fields and were crucial in supporting the food supply for their Loudoun farm owners during the war. Chestnut Hill, home of Josiah Clapham. During the Revolutionary War, the county court appointed individuals with financial means to aid military families. This aid included food, clothing, money, and the care of sick family members. Josiah Clapham, born in Virginia in 1725, died in 1803, served as a lieutenant in the Virginia militia. During the American Revolution, he served as a colonel. He lived outside of Leesburg, Virginia at Chestnut Hill. He had a variety of business ventures: watermill, warehouse, mercantile, and ferry. He was a slaveholder and had many enslaved men, women, and children. And that property does still exist, and I visited to take that photo and the fieldstones, which were further down in the field. It's off of Route 15 going north towards Memphis. James Armistead Lafayette. James Armistead Lafayette was born between 1748 or 1760 in New Kent, Virginia, and died 1830 or 1832. He was an enslaved African American who served the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War under the Marquis de Lafayette and later received a legislative emancipation. He worked for Lafayette as a courier, laborer, and spy. Posing as a runaway slave, James joined former Continental Army officer Benedict Arnold's camp in Portsmouth, Virginia, ostensibly as a spy for the British. Honored in New Kent, Virginia, with a historical highway marker and monument.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Okay, two things about our spy is that is on the curriculum in the schools, so most kids know about Lafayette. We used Armistead, but he did not use that. That was his owner's name. He called himself James. Okay, James. He would not use the owner's name. At the end, as she had mentioned, he received the legislative emancipation. This is number 2 for George Washington. He was in George Washington's camp with Lafayette, as close as we are. And Lafayette did not, and George Washington did not free him. George Washington allowed his owner to come and pick him up and take him back. Because he was literate, he wrote to Lafayette in Paris and said, "Hey, I did all this work for you, and I'm still enslaved." Well, Lafayette came to his rescue. Not George Washington, Lafayette. And Lafayette wrote to the legislature and said, "I have a humble, brave man here who should be free." I'm paraphrasing. But my point is that even when you worked hard, took risk for your life, it did not guarantee freedom. And he's an example of that. So we're happy that he's free, and we're happy now there's a highway marker. There's a lot of things, if you're ever in Virginia, in New Kent, in that direction, and look for information on James Lafayette. Yes.
So did he just, in honor of Lafayette, just take his name?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't leave that part out. He did, I'm sorry. After Lafayette, after he was given his freedom, he took Lafayette as his last name. So then he became, although in all the literature and everything I read, they still put Armistead in there. So we do too, because it's everywhere. But I also read that he never personally used it, but he did put Lafayette in honor of his freedom. The best way you can honor a person is to take their last name.
Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley, born 1753, died 1784, was kidnapped from West Africa by slave traders at 7 years old and brought to Boston on a ship called the Phyllis, her namesake. There she was sold to merchant John Wheatley as an enslaved servant for his wife Susanna. The Wheatleys educated her to read, write, and speak multiple languages. She was the first African American and one of the first women to publish a book of poetry in the colonies. Her words became her weapon. Elizabeth Mumbet Freeman. On August 22, 1781, Elizabeth Mumbet Freeman secured her freedom in a precedent-setting court case in Massachusetts. Freeman was one of the first enslaved people in Massachusetts to file a freedom suit and win in court under their 1780 Constitution with a ruling that slavery was illegal. And this is one of her quotes. Anytime while I was a slave, if 1 minute's freedom had been offered to me, and I had been told that I must die at the end of that minute, I would have taken it just to stand 1 minute on God's earth, a free woman. Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker was a free black man born in 1731 in Maryland and died in 1806. Banneker is perhaps best known for his role in drawing the original borders of Washington, D.C. He was largely a self-educated mathematician, astronomer, compiler of almanacs, and farmer. He helped survey territory for the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. This artwork shows him wearing a wig, popular by the wealthy and elite during colonial times. Banneker Elementary School, located near Middleburg, Virginia, in St. Louis, is named after him. Ona Judge. Ona Judge Staines, born 1773 to 1846, was an enslaved woman who famously escaped from the household of George and Martha Washington. Serving as Martha Washington's personal body servant, she fled from the president's house in Philadelphia in 1796 upon learning she was to be gifted to Martha's granddaughter, Elizabeth Custis Law. Despite several attempts by Washington to recapture her using federal agents and family members, she successfully lived the rest of her life as a free woman.
Okay. So I will say, after you see the exhibit downstairs in Loudoun County, that you go out to Mount Vernon and learn more about Ona Judge and some of the other people that we've talked about, because that is our largest estate in Northern Virginia. We have Oaklands and others, but the largest is Mount Vernon. And Ona has quite a presence there. And she now has a new marker outside. They didn't put it inside, but she was a runaway. They put it on the outside of the estate to Ona Judge, but they do talk about her. So these were two of the original flags that were used as America was forming its nation. And you might have heard that, I think it was June 14th was Flag Day. And if anyone here is particularly interested in the stories of flags, the American flags, the Cascades Library, it's not until July 2nd. If anybody's here or just wants to become a flag person, you know, this historian's going to talk in depth about the American flag, how it was created. But look at this flag. No, that's okay. But look at this flag. Did they get our colors or did we get their colors? What? How creative are we? So now we're going to talk about the British and proclamation and the freedom of the Black Loyalists. How did they become Black Loyalists? Well, you won't be able to read this just now, but back here, insinuated. He said, there are all these people on all these farms. If I get these Negroes off these farms, I'll have an army. Dunmore, who was the royal governor at the time, the British were not located at Norfolk or in the South. They were more in the North. The largest contingents were like in New York and in the North. So when there were rumblings of war coming down, he didn't have enough people to protect him. You know, he and his family and the British people around. I don't think he was caring about most people. He was thinking of himself. So he said, well, we've got indentured servants. We've got Negroes. We can provide them freedom if they come and work for us. So he got the jump. This is why many Black enslaved and free went towards the Loyalist area of freedom. It's because he was the first one to offer them freedom. And so they were not going to wait around. The first opportunity they had was through him, and Lord Dunmore offered them that freedom. He says, if your master is in rebellion, think about the Civil War now. Where did those words come from? Where did Lincoln get those words from? He took those words from here. The slave workers whose masters were in rebellion against the crown, they could come in to Dunmore's army. And it was the first mass emancipation of enslaved people in North America. I'll go down to almost the last bullet where you see 20 to 30,000. 20, that was what got my interest. 20 to 30,000 men, women, and children fled the farms and plantations in the South to go and work for Lord, to serve Dunmore and the crown. They did not care about the crown. They cared that someone said, if you work for me, I'll give you your freedom. Okay, that's all they cared about. And has anyone seen the mini-series, The Book of Negroes? Oh, you gotta see that. Oh man. That is like a mini-series of 6 parts. It was on Tubi, one of those free cable.
And it was on Netflix.
It was on Netflix, but it's on the Tubi now, Tubi, and it'll be 6 series, and it talks about the Loyalists. Primarily, it's focusing on the Loyalists. Oh, and it's based on this book by Lawrence Hill, The Book of Negroes, and Lawrence Hill is the author. Lawrence Hill is also a descendant of the Loyalists, okay? So he wrote it. It's a historical fiction, so the majority of the information is factual, but there are some fictions because we didn't have a lot of people taking notes in those days. And I'll tell you in a second about the Book of Negroes. But we'll finish with the proclamation. There was the second proclamation because apparently when Lord Dunmore wrote his proclamation, he didn't really get permission from George III. He just kind of did it on his own. He said, I'm the governor, I should be able to do this. Well, I guess there was some scum in the background. So in comes Sir Henry Clinton, and he had the Phillipsburg Proclamation. But that's okay because it was even better. Not only did they support the policy, but they also they also included land. So if you, before it was just freedom, the second proclamation added land. And that's when that 20 to 30,000 people said, I'm out of here. But remember, they really weren't interested in the freedom of slaves. Not really. They just wanted the bodies. They just wanted bodies to work during wartime. That was it.
Black Loyalists. By the war's end, between 800 to 2,000 enslaved African Americans in Virginia fled to British lines. Some were organized into a fighting unit known as Dunmore's Ethiopian Brigade. Lord Dunmore was the British governor, as we talked about previously, of Virginia, and a proclamation was written promising freedom to slaves, and he formed the Ethiopian Regiment, who fought alongside British troops wearing uniforms emblazoned with the motto, "Liberty to slaves."
Okay, so you see the word Ethiopian. Well, we know Ethiopians today, but does anybody know why they could even use that name of a people or a place at that time? Guess? Okay.
Like just a generalization?
Say it again.
Just a generalization?
It's a generalization of people from Africa. In Europe, they were very familiar with Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a Coptic Christian country, and so therefore they knew Christian countries. They also knew, empires knew empires. You know where the empires are all around the world. And so anybody who was brown or black, they called them Ethiopian. And so that was that term there. Because I've been to Ethiopia, when I saw that, I thought, what? But then that's the explanation. Loyalists, getting back to kind of your question to the loyalists, the first thing you need to know is any person in the colony could be a loyalist, any ethnicity, woman, even child, because children did work. An example of a loyalist at the highest social level was Benjamin Franklin's son. Benjamin Franklin's son was William Franklin. He was the governor of the colony of New Jersey. And he stood fast. His father, who was a patriot, and of course we know how he was a part of history and one of the founders, but his father could not make him budge. He would not budge. He remained a loyalist throughout the whole war. When the war was over and the Patriots won, he sailed to England and lived his life out of England. So it shows you again the Civil War in a family. One person can be a patriot, another one can be a loyalist. And people who were wealthy, most wealthy, were loyalists. They had a lot to lose. They were the merchants. You're going to cut off my English contact? Well, they couldn't afford to do that. Some did, some didn't. But William Franklin, no. Again, we had soldiers, which included Titus Cornelius. He was a rebel. So he is my guy here. Because I love it. He was a guerrilla. He would fight anywhere for anybody as a loyalist. Because they all joined in the military early on in the war. Harry Washington. Harry Washington. Harry Washington. What state do you think he came from? Harry Washington. George Washington, right. He self-emancipated twice. The first time he ran, they caught him. The second time, he was able to escape, go to New York, where the British had all their ships. And when the British evacuated, he evacuated with them to Nova Scotia. He has a longer story, and I'll probably get to it again in a minute, but he was a soldier, Jupiter farmer, I'll get to him, but, and you'll see a picture of his descendant. So I'll go back to, let's just say 1781. Of course, the Patriots won. They defeated the British at Yorktown. Has anybody been to Yorktown? I haven't. I hope to go. Yes, good. I'm glad to see that. Yeah. But I want to point out the Book of Negroes because 250 years ago it was not a book. a register. So when you get on the ship, they write everybody's name down, where they come from. And so when they're evacuating the Black Loyalists from North America, you had to come to New York if you wanted to get on the ship. Walk, ride, or whatever. You had to come to New York. So as they're evacuating on the ship with this at least 3,000 free persons, they were free because they worked as loyalists. They took their names down, they took their age, a lot of census information, as well as where they were coming from, and that constituted the term the Book of Negroes. You can also find the Book of Negroes online. Just Google it, it'll come up in a Canadian book, but it's there. Now, these free persons who were going and being evacuated to Canada had to have certificates of freedom. That stumped me because I thought they were going to Canada and everybody was free. But what do you think? Why do they need a certificate? They carry certificates in the United States if they were free. They had to leave and go to Canada and do the same thing. Anybody have an idea? Yeah. Just
Was
take a
it just
guess.
a way to, for the British at that time, so if you didn't have it, maybe you really weren't, you had to stay, so it negated their obligation. If you said 20 to 30,000 served, they didn't want to take 20 to 30,000 anywhere, so it negated those.
And that's what I thought. I thought exactly the same thing. But you know what? It's because they had slavery in Canada. You were entering another slave economy. Another slave. Okay, it's the British. They were enslaving everybody everywhere. They were enslaving in North America, the Caribbean, as far as their empire could take them. But I thought exactly the same thing. And that's why it's interesting when you hear things on the surface and you read about it in depth. You come up with what was on the surface and an additional idea. And that idea was, in the War of 1812, the same thing happened. The War of 1812, the British did the same thing, they lost. Of course you know that. And they also had proclamations that Negroes to work for them, to serve in the military. When it was over, they lost, they didn't get anything. So they told the same thing, you could come and be free and part of our British colonies. And so a lot of them went to Bermuda, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, like all in the Caribbean. You could go to Canada, England. So they did the whole thing again. And also, those people were brought into slave economies. Can you imagine going into Jamaica? Millions of enslaved people, and it's like 25 of you going to Jamaica and you're free. That I haven't read anything about the feelings on that, but so the exodus and the migration from New York was primarily to go to Nova Scotia, but they had an option. They could go with the Haitians to Germany. They could go to England, Sierra Leone, West Africa, and the West Indies. So it's really global. So think about it today. All of these people, maybe 3,000 or more, have descendants all over the world now. And they were loyalists. Nova Scotia had the largest group of free people at that time outside of Africa. The largest group. And freedom sounds great, but there were a lot of challenges to this freedom. First of all, they got to Nova Scotia, and you'll see a visual of this if you look at the Book of Negroes video. If you look at it, you'll see it. They, of course, the promises were broken when they got to Nova Scotia. They didn't have any land. There was no preparation to give them land at that time. They didn't even have shelter. It took the Native Americans in Nova Scotia to help them to build lake houses in the soil based on their culture to survive for the first 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 years, they didn't get land right away. So they were free, but there were people there when they got to Nova Scotia and parts of them. There were already people living there. These people in there were saying, why are you bringing all these black people to our place? It was like, we don't want them here. But the soldiers said, well, we're dropping them off, deal with it. And so, a lot of challenges. There is the majority of the now free people going to Nova Scotia. Almost 900 were from Virginia. Now, how did they know that? They counted them on the Book of Negroes. Their names were there. And they know who they are in Nova Scotia today. They know who they are.
Did they eventually get land?
They eventually got land. It was hard. And it's still hard. They were discriminated against. They were, their homes were burned down. They were shot and killed. So eventually, and I didn't see it on the video. I had one there. Oh, okay, where do you see Sarah Leone? Eventually, the Harry Washingtons and a group of folk leaders said, we want to get out of here. We'll go anywhere, but we don't want to stay in Nova Scotia. And so they went to Liberia. Not necessarily, I mean, that's hard, that has its challenges too, just like we've heard about Liberia. They all had challenges, but that was one out. But then many stayed. Just like people left the South in America, but people stayed in the South too. People left, but people stayed in the South. But it was, going to Nova Scotia was almost like a modern day immigration story. Oh, yeah, you can go there, but these other people don't want you here, and they're going to make it very hard for you to stay. Very hard. And you almost wonder, how did they make it? You know, no shelter, no food, no work. And so it was difficult. And when you talk to people from Nova Scotia today, they will tell you how difficult it is. And they'll tell you how they've continued to face discrimination even today. So, no perfect place to live. No perfect place.
Harry Washington. Harry Washington, circa 1740 to 1800, was a black loyalist in the American Revolutionary War. Harry had been born in Gambia and sold into slavery as a war captive. He was purchased by George Washington, who had plantations in Virginia. During the American Revolutionary War, Harry Washington escaped from slavery in Virginia and served as a corporal in the Black Pioneers attached to a British artillery unit. After the war, he was among black loyalists resettled by the British in Nova Scotia, where they were granted land. There, Washington married Jenny, another freed American slave. In 1792, the couple were among more than 1,000 freedmen chosen to migrate to Sierra Leone, West Africa, where the British had established a new colony of people of African descent. The Black Loyalists. The Black Loyalists founded settlements throughout Nova Scotia. The largest was at Birchtown, near Shelburne, with an initial population of about 1,500. The people of Birchtown earned their living in the fishery, cutting wood, clearing land, and hunting, and as domestic servants and day laborers. Local indigenous people helped them to survive the cruel winter. The Book of Negroes, book and miniseries.
Okay, so 250 years later. So you see in the little bubble, Andrea Davis. She's a descendant of Jupiter Farmer. When I have his name, she's a descendant. And she's also the curator of the Center for Black Loyalist Heritage Center. She's the curator of that center. And she and her family go back to the Loyalists. And we had her here, well, we didn't have her here, we had her on Zoom here in Loudoun County at a symposium in November. Quite interesting. She's very honest and blunt about her experience as a Canadian. She was born in Quebec, but her family still comes from Nova Scotia. And, you know, I never asked her whether they were from Virginia or where. But anyway, there are 52 distinct communities within Nova Scotia. And if you have a chance, I have a map back here. And it shows you how Nova Scotia looks. And the little dots show you where many of the communities are. And
If you want to talk about talent, media talent, or Fox.
oh yeah, yes, oh yes, okay, another descendant. So we've gotten 3 loyalist descendants. This is the 3rd one. Of course, I told you about Lawrence Hill, who's a writer. Just told you about Andrea. And then right here on Fox News in D.C. Okay, oh my gosh. Gwen Talbert, who comes on Fox News every day. She is a descendant of loyalists. And how did we find out? We did not know this at first. But we had an exhibit, Gertrude's paintings, and our exhibit was opened last spring or summer or something. I don't know. Anyway, we lost track. She came to report on it. She came to report on Oaklands, and then she came into the gallery space, and she reported on our exhibit. And then she saw everything that was related to the Loyalists. And she said, I don't believe it. Someone knows about the Loyalists? And she told her cameraman, you see, I told you, my family was a Loyalist, you know. And so she was really grateful, and I had her take a picture with me that day. And she said, she cut off the thing in the camera, and she said, okay, look into the camera, because my mother watches every day. And then we got back on, and she said a few words like, into the camera, for her mother who watches from Nova Scotia. And so I say this to say, and also, oh, I know what, we're talking about Black loyalists. Is anyone here descendant of loyalists? Black or white or Native American? Okay, so I always ask that. And the last time, I think we were in the library or something. Yeah. We're at the library, and one of the DAR women, who is of European descent, she is a descendant of a loyalist and a patriot. So I said, anyone here a descendant of patriots? She raised her hand. Said, anyone here a descendant of loyalists? She raised her hand. I said, both? And yes, she's a descendant of both. And she's an active, I think she's in Cameron Parish, if anybody's familiar with the DAR in our county. And let's see, anything else? The Center, the Heritage Center, was trying to do a reverse genealogy because they know where they came from. They know they came from Virginia, but where in Virginia, I don't know. You know, it's like the census. People put Virginia. They don't put Lynchburg, Virginia. They put Virginia. So I don't know what they're going to do with that. But anyway, they were working with Williamsburg, with the genealogists in Williamsburg, to try and do reverse genealogy to get back to where they were, those who were from Virginia. So that's a project that is ongoing for me. Okay, so we're going to kind of close out and we're going to test your knowledge. And we have a couple of patriots up there, and maybe you remember what their contributions were. Can anyone tell us about Crispus Attucks? You don't have to do a whole thing, just. I hear something going on.
Cohen.
Poet, yes, young poet. Daniel Coleman.
Free Black,
Say it again.
Free Black Patriot and Loyalists.
Free Black Patriot. After Yorktown, he came to live in Loudoun County. We have a little card on him in the package that you have. And so you'll see the card, and then on the back there's a description. Okay, so there are thousands of patriots, thousands. Some of these we hear about Richard Allen. Anybody from Philadelphia? Okay, that's all about religion. He was the one that started the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So we didn't get into religion. There's so much to know. Hannah Till, very seldom do you hear about her, but when you hear about George Washington and his campsite when he's out in the battles, she was his cook. Okay, she was his cook, and not only that, they have named a Daughters of the American Revolution chapter after her. Because she's a cook, she provides service. People think that the service is all military, but it's any aid that you provided to help with the war. And she was a cook, and I don't know when they named her chapter, but she has a name chapter after her. Hannah Till and her husband, she and her husband did that. And then Peter Salem, the Salem Poor, they're all soldiers. Bill Flora, soldier. Mary Hemmings Bell. What name do you recognize in those three names? Sally. Yes, Hemmings. You recognize Sally. Well, we have a descendant of Mary Hemmings Bell in Ashburn. Okay? And Mary Hemmings Bell herself was a half-sister of Sally Hemmings. But Robin Birch doesn't mind me using her name because she works with the Loudoun Freedom Center and NAACP. And her family is a descendant of Mary Hemmings Bell. And you can Google her, big story online on her, but I will tell you that it's kind of convoluted how she aided the war. She was a prisoner of war because she was taken as property by the British from Thomas Jefferson. They swooped in and took a lot of his slaves, threw them all in prison because that's property. That's like taking his money. That's like taking thousands and thousands of dollars. And she was one of them. I think she and some of her children. And as a result of that, they recognized her as providing aid and service for the war. I can't exactly give you how they did that, but anyway, she's famous for that. And also there's a chapter, I think there's a chapter right here in Loudoun County named after her, Mary Hemmings Bell. I think it's a new chapter. But anyway, it just goes to show you, this is just, 0.000 number of people that you could look into. But it's, as you move around the country and you see these names on markers, or you might read it in a book, you can look a little deeper. And I use Google because Google is your friend. And, you don't have to, every article may not be quite accurate, but there'll be enough information. Because when I heard about Mary Hemmings Bell, I was like, ooh, when? And then when you go on Google, she's there. And it tells the whole story. And not only that, on Google, you'll see the picture of Robin and her sister, because there's a newspaper article there. So you might even Virginia 250 group and created a little book called The American Revolution. I've got about 8 or 9 over there on the table. You can take those books with the other books around. This is a book list that I got the library, our library, Loudoun County Library, to produce for us. However, I don't have any more copies, but you're welcome to take a picture of it. You can take it out, spread it out, take a picture. This was a seminar, that was a symposium that with myself and the Thomas Balch Library put together in November, but the QR code in the front of the back you can take a picture of, and all of the sessions are there for you to look at. And if you forget about it, you don't do it here, just go on the website for the Thomas Balch Library, and it's listed there. And there are 3 speakers, of course. Andrea from Nova Scotia is on there. Rick Murphy, who is an author, and I think he has 10 patriots from the Revolutionary War. I'm exaggerating, but it's at least 5. His mother is a descendant, well, he's a descendant too. His mother and her family are descendants from the enslaved that came in 1619. That's how far back his family goes. And Shelley Murphy is a genealogist. He works with the University of Virginia and all over. But if you're interested in a symposium, it's like 4 sessions. You don't have to look at them all at once. You can just look at one and then come back later. Let's see. If you didn't have time to see the exhibit downstairs, except for those people who came from Chicago, please come back and see it. Maybe you can see it before you leave. But there's a small exhibit, very nice, well done. Also talks about the Loyalists and Patriots down there. Very well done. And then don't forget, as I mentioned, Mount Vernon, because they have also revised, if you haven't been to Mount Vernon in a long time, they have renovated and changed all their exhibits. And the positive part of their exhibit is that they have included their enslaved people throughout the estate. So it's not like one exhibit you see it and you go and it's all negated because these people were just over here. They're integrated within, which would lend itself to more reality than just an exhibit. Anything else for us? Okay, so we're closing. Many Black Patriots and founders were re-enslaved. Now, it was the downside for the Patriots, but they had hope for the future because they made a choice. They did have agency. I read a book where many of the Patriots also over generations had descendants that fought in the Civil War. That's a whole other thing, but you can trace many of them that had descendants after 150 years fought in the Civil War. The Black Loyalists also had hope, and they self-emancipated around the world. Today we have hope as we protect the rights that are being eroded. Reflect on the through lines for the American Revolution, the Civil War, to Juneteenth, or emancipation. And with that, Gertrude